Welcome back to the Inspiration Station where stories spark action. I'm your host, Mr. U. Wherever you are and however you're watching this episode today, thanks for making us part of your week. We're live on YouTube, Facebook, and of course, you can find all of our work across all social media and podcast listening platforms. Thanks again for tuning in. Our guest today is the author of the powerful memoir, Enough. Rowan Vale with us. Rowan, good to see you today, man. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me, Mr. Yu. It's an honor.
Same here, brother. Good to have you in the house with us today, man. You talk about things that are very, very important to me personally, and of course, we do cover that on a lot of the shows on our brand, man. You talk a lot about fatherhood, identity, faith. I want to get into some of that stuff, man. But first off, congratulations. I heard you that you're on a sober journey, man. 7 months in, I think it is, or probably more than that by now, and you're doing well,
Uh,
man. Congratulations on your journey, brother.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, my journey started 9 months ago, but I've been completely substance free for just over 7 months.
That's incredible, man. That's something to be celebrated, man. People don't talk about that kind of stuff a lot, but it's good that I get a chance to kind of celebrate you here, right here, on the air with us, man. So good to have you here, and good to have you in a sort of good spot on your journey, man. Good stuff. All right, so you wrote something about, and this is a term that I've heard before, but I want to hear your thoughts on. You wrote with a term that you gave pieces of yourself away to other people. That's deep to me because of some of the things that I deal with in ministry and in coaching and counseling and things like that. What would you say is the first piece of yourself that you lost that you kind of gave away? Probably didn't even notice it was gone. What was that first piece of you?
Well, you know, I couldn't actually name the first piece because I was so young at the time when it started to happen.
Okay.
But, I never had a real sense of belonging. I grew up in a divorced family and my dad was hardly in the picture. So I had a sense of abandonment and I never felt like I belonged anywhere because everybody was doing their own thing and I never felt like I was loved or belonged. And so when, you know, I learned how to be useful and just stay busy and I was accepted to do that, and by doing that I was people pleasing, and I didn't realize what I was doing at the time because I just felt like I was being useful, and it it slowly gave pieces of myself away, and it I carried that through growing up into my teen years and young 20s where I became codependent on relationships, and I just I wanted to fit in, I wanted to belong, I needed to be seen and validated and loved, and something that I never had growing up. And by doing that, like I made choices that were bad and that I fell into, some depression and all that, and it led into addiction, which was the symptom to cover all that up. And by doing, by trying to quiet the noise in my mind that I didn't know how to handle, I kept wanting to numb it, and it turned into one substance after the other because the effects started wearing off. So I moved to something stronger, and the things that I did to keep using, I was giving pieces of myself away, and so it started at a young age, and I just carried it with me up until the point where I one day looked in the mirror and I didn't know who that was anymore.
Wow. I, there's so much here, and I want to try to respect our time, but this just sparked so much for me personally. It's there are a lot of people around us, even in the circles that I run in, and you can hear it. They look in the mirror, they don't recognize who they are, but they have invested too much to turn back, and they are too fearful to not keep going forward on the quote unquote success journey. For you, who's somebody who is dealing with and managing the journey of sobriety, and then putting the depression aside and refocusing and reframing some things that were bad narratives in your life. What does rebuilding look like for you, even in the middle of this process? Like, how does it look for you in regard to your family? Uh, you know, the freedom you have. Your life. How does rebuilding look for you?
Well, it's about every day waking up and being honest with myself, one step at a time, and surrendering. Trying to give up control because me trying to control things put me in a, I my best thinking got me to where I was at. And so by giving up the control and surrendering, like, I'm along for the ride. And I've realized that there's been so many things that I called coincidences in my life that I just learned to trust that that's God working in my favor. As long as I keep doing the next right thing and being honest and staying sober. And I was at a point in my life where I thought I was past the point of no return, that I was beyond saving, and that I was too far gone. And I went about as low as a person could go, and I'm still here. There was a point in my life where I wanted to erase myself. I just thought it would be easier for me just to disappear. And I thought I succeeded, but there's something in me fought back, and it brought me into the rooms in recovery, and I saw something in people that they started sharing their stories, but at the same time I was hearing my story at the same time, and I realized that I wasn't alone, and that maybe there is hope. And so I started leaning in. I searched everywhere except for leaning in, and all them outside sources that I tried to drown out the noise. None of it actually worked until I started looking inward.
Mhm.
So for me, it's about being honest and doing the next right thing, and leading by example at the same time.
Wow. It sounds like you're doing some work on you. I hear people who have fantastic stories of resilience and breakthrough, and they come on a show, this show specifically, and they kind of regale us with the stories of how they bounced back and what they came back from. But I don't always hear it. I always try to pull it out of our guests about the work. Sound like you're doing the daily work on yourself. Can you kind of give a quick breakdown of what that looks like for you from a practical standpoint? Because the people who are watching, listening today, that they may be able to relate to the story. Maybe their story is even worse than what yours was coming up, and they are on the journey like you are. But what does the work look like? The in between work, practically.
Well, it's absolutely, being able to. I get up in the morning, and I sit in my thoughts, and I pray and I meditate. That's something I never used to be able to do when I first got into recovery. I couldn't sit still 5 minutes. But now I take my time in the morning, and I pray, and I thank God, just for waking up. Starting my day with gratitude, that really, started changing my perception on life and things, and my day goes a lot better. And all we have is today. So if I can get through today, then I don't have to worry about tomorrow, because tomorrow never comes. And when early in recovery, all it was like that just for today was a little long. Like I had to go, 1 hour at a time, even sometimes 1 minute at a time. If I could get through that, then it grew. It's progress, not perfection. And for me, when it's not a lightning bolt moment where, oh, I'm recovered. It's I just have to do the daily grind. Some days are good and some days are bad. I'm dealing with character defects and bad patterns that I was conditioned with most of my life. So when something comes up, and it's a trigger, now that I'm becoming better at becoming aware of my emotions and these triggers, they don't control me anymore, as long as I put the work in and be aware of the situations. And there's still fear in there. Before I can remember, I was controlled by fear most of my life. And now that I'm becoming aware of my patterns and my thoughts and everything, like by doing the work, I'm aware of all that, and I can change those patterns and change my life. And then going I go to I at least go to one meeting a day. I
Okay.
I really I really grind in. Some days I'll put in multiple meetings, and I surround myself with good recovery. The same like-minded people. I don't put myself in situations too much where it brings up triggers, because if it does, then I know I start listening to my body and now, versus before, where I would shut off that part of my body where you get those gut instincts and stuff. And I just learned that that's God saying, hey, pay attention. And I'm trusting that and trusting myself more. And it's every time heals all. And one thing that especially is that people started loving me before I could love myself, and because of that, I'm able to do that for others.
That's good, man. I want to take the time to get maybe a few more questions than if we can with the time we have left. Uh,
Yeah.
about how addiction almost killed you, and I feel like people need to understand that addiction isn't some light you can turn on and off, and something that doesn't have any far-reaching impact. it reaches even far into even to other generations. So it's not just about you when addiction hits the scene. What would you say is the thing that you can clearly see that addiction could have taken from you, but it didn't?
Well, it definitely could have taken my life.
Sure.
There's a couple times where the substances I was using had other stuff in it, and I ended up overdosing. But it also, almost took my identity. Um, I was doing things for the substances that, I would have never done sober, and it was all just to, these masks and identities I created, to fit in. And when I started peeling all that stuff away and doing the inner work, I found, the little boy that was trapped down underneath all of it, that was buried, and now I can be true to myself. So that's definitely one thing addiction has could have taken away from me, was the true me.
One thing I noticed you didn't mention your family, and I feel like that was definitely important to that as well. You mentioned about when you started writing your memoir enough, and just the whole need for privacy for your family. Without going into any details that are too revealing or too identifiable, can you kind of explain why you felt as though your family's privacy needs to be protected? Because I don't quite understand that from your story. Are you able to share
Okay,
that a little bit?
yeah, so there's been some stuff in my criminal history that, like, certain
Okay.
people know about my criminal history. And then so it has to do with my family, and if too many details were said, it'd be pretty
No,
obvious who I
no, that makes sense.
but yeah. And then,
Absolutely.
like, as far as my daughters, I have a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old that I haven't seen in 7 years.
Correct.
And so, like, yeah, I haven't, but I left because I thought at the time that, I was doing what was best for them, because I couldn't give them the life that they deserved, and I didn't want them to have the same situation that I grew up in. So, I just thought it was easier for me, and I kept that guilt and shame inside me for 7 years, and it drove me into such an addiction that I was ready just to disappear, and they would have never known who I am. But today, I'm becoming the man that I needed to be, and also the man that they could be proud of and deserve as a father when God brings them back into my life.
Love it. I want to ask you to do two more things for me before we close the show out. I'll give it to you in portions, so it won't be too much on you. So the first thing I want to do is, if you can, for those that listen today who may believe, you know what, they're that person that's just beyond redemption. What's the truth that you think they need to hear right now so they can believe that change is possible?
That you are seen. That feeling of being too far gone and past the point of no return. That's the lie. That's the addiction trying to hold you back. And you're closer than you know from your greatest breakthrough. There's people out there who love you and who want to help you, and that you're not alone.
You love that. And final thing, and then we'll close the show out. I have the link to your memoir on the screen for you guys that are listening now. Watching, it's a very long link, so I can't shell it all out, but I will go ahead and drop it in the comment section and in the show notes, so you can grab a copy of Rowan's book, Enough, the memoir about losing yourself to addiction and finding a long way back. He has that available on Amazon, so I'll put it up on the screen momentarily. But while we're doing that, Rowan, just one well, final ask from you today. I know what it's like to deal with daughters that are estranged for some reason or another. So I'd love for you to speak to the daughters out there like yours as a father who is full of love for them. What would you want to say to those daughters who are wondering, maybe, is does their dad even care anymore? Is there a reason why he hasn't found me or he hasn't come to me? Whatever it is you want to say from the standpoint of being a father, but also from the meat of the memoir that you wrote, Enough. Speak to those daughters out there, and then we'll go ahead
The
and close
first
this
thing I
out.
would say is that none of this was your fault, and I just, you need to understand that none of this was your fault, and I know that, being away for so long, that I can't get that time back, and the dads out there can't get that time back. but just know that I'm doing everything I can to get back into my children's life, just like I'm sure that other fathers are. And we want nothing more than to be back in your lives. But you are loved and you are taken care of, and I carry them with me every day. So, when God decides that, when God brings you guys back in my life, um, yeah, I want nothing more than to be there. And I, my only hope is I'm becoming the man that you deserve.
Thank you for coming on and sharing your story. It's definitely powerful and inspirational, man. And we wish you the best on your journey with your sobriety as well as with you being restored with your daughters. You clearly love them a lot, man. So thanks again for coming in and being so transparent with your story, man. Definitely appreciate you, man.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. You.
The author of Enough, Rowan Vale, brothers. If you're watching and listening for the very first time, we want to say thank you for making us part of your week. You can find all of our shows across all social media platforms and podcast listening platforms. This is the Inspiration Station where stories spark action. That's Rowan Vale. I'm Mr. U. Have a great day. Thanks for watching and listening.